The Madman!
At last, it's that time. It's time for the Trump Reviews Mega Recap, where I rate all the cards a star rating. Some people criticize that this style of rating cards doesn't represent how strong the card is later on. It only represents how strong it is this expansion, and that's true, actually. And there are quite a few cards that will be much stronger after this expansion. In fact, after the rotation. But that isn't the point of these stars. It's to rate how much play these cards will see in the standard metagame following in this 4-month period. Let's start with Lesser Jasper Spellstone. That's actually pretty efficient. 1 mana deal 2 to a minion, potentially 1 mana deal 6. The main problem with it is just that all the current decks can't really fit this card into them. You don't really gain armor that consistently to upgrade it. 1 mana deal 2 certainly isn't strong enough in these decks, and it's not quite strong enough to warrant a build around. And while you can gain the armor with a card like Oaken Summons, and there's all this synergy going on, I'm just not seeing it as being stronger than the current Druid archetypes. We've got Barkskin. Barkskin is just worse than Earthen Scales, so 1 star. Next up, we've got Greedy Sprite. Some people think that there's some potential in this card, but I don't really see it. So I'm going to rate it 2 stars. I think Greedy Sprite is outclassed by both Jade Blossom and Mire Keeper, and I don't think you run all of Wild Growth, Mire Keeper, Jade Blossom, and Greedy Sprite. It's hurt by the fact that it's a death rattle. You can't Greedy Sprite into Nourish, but you can Jade Blossom into Nourish. Ironwood Golem is next, and I don't think it's much better than Sen'jin's Shield Mask. I don't think the entire Recruit 4 theme is going to be good, so I'm rating it a 1-star card. Astral Tiger is clearly meant to be part of the theme of recruiting 4 drops, but it's just not strong enough, and even though you can recruit infinite of these Astral Tigers in theory, I'm saying no to that. 1 star. Oaken Summons is kind of the big enabler of getting a 4-drop and getting 6 armor, which is good in theory, but it's just that all the archetypes of Druid are better than this recruit 4-drop idea. And it's fine that Druid gets kinda not so great and gets the side weird path here, because boy are their decks really strong right now. They're 3 tier 1 decks. Anyways, Oaken Summons, 1-star card. Branching Paths. I tried to put this into my control decks, into my token decks for Druid, and it is very versatile, but the versatility comes at a price that I'm not willing to pay. I think it's going to be a 2-star card. People will try it out. People will realize, it's just not efficient enough to put it into their decks, but close enough to actually see some competitive experimentation. Twig of the World Tree, the legendary Druid weapon. I think it's a meme, but I think that there will be some serious practice and testing with the card. It does have merit. You can high roll branch into Medivh, and boy is that insane when you high roll branch Medivh Ultimate Infestation. According to my calculations, Twig into Medivh only happens 11% of the time though, and I'm not seeing it. So I rated it a 2-star card. People will try it out competitively and then will drop it eventually. Ixlid Fungal Lord. I think this card is so unlikely to be successful that it's not even really going to see enough competitive experimentation. Yes, it can go insane with Twig, but Twig is already a reach, so Ixlid I rate 1 star. Grizzled Guardian. It's the big daddy of Recruit 4. It was intended to be the card that pulls together Ironwood Golem and Astral Tiger, and I just think that an 8 mana 3/5 taunt is not powerful enough to have this theme, and more importantly, I think that the other Druid archetypes are stronger than this archetype. So I rate Grizzled Guardian, and ultimately this Recruit 4 mechanic, 1 star. So it certainly seems like Druid isn't getting very much good stuff, but hey, if there were any class that wasn't going to get any much good stuff, I would want it to be Druid, because they're in a really good spot right now, 3 very valid archetypes. So I'm glad that the side path was explored for Druid. Next up, we have Hunter. Starting with Candle Shot. I'm going to give this card 2 stars. I think that there is some potential here for aggro decks. Very little possibility for mid-range decks. It's a 1 mana 1/3. You compare this with N'Zoth's First Mate, and it's not even close, because N'Zoth's First Mate comes with a 1/1, and boy do I like a 1/1 more than just This weapon doesn't deal damage to you when you're attacking. It's just not strong enough to justify it, say. Wandering Monster. I originally thought this secret sucked. It was basically Noble Sacrifice. And yet I'm still going to rate it a 2-star card because I think it's going to be tried out in these mid-range hunter lists, purely because of Lesser Emerald Spellstone. Lesser Emerald Spellstone's so powerful, you may even want to put a weak card, looks weak to me, Wandering Monster into your deck, just because all of the auto hunter secrets, other than Cat Trick, are even worse. Potentially. Cave Hydra. I think a 3-mana 2/4 just isn't competitive enough the turn it comes out, so I'm going to give it a 1 star. Sure, it's strong with Houndmaster, but I think that is not a good enough reason. Flanking Strike. That is a really strong card, and will see play in mid-range hunter, I fully expect. I'm only rating it a 4-star card, not 5 stars, just because I'm not confident in how strong mid-range hunter will be. So if it's a tier 2 deck, then alright, about 4 stars. But yeah, Flanking Strike is so powerful that it could significantly boost the power level of mid-range hunter. Lesser Emerald Spellstone. This is a very powerful card. Any card that has potential to get so much value should be heavily looked at. 5 mana to either get 6/6 worth of stats, 9/9 worth of stats, or 12/12 worth of stats. Wow. Will Lesser Emerald Spellstone be good enough to convince hunters to run Cat Trick as well as something else? That's the question. And is it going to be good in a Duskbreaker, potentially Duskbreaker meta? That's certainly a question as well. And that's why I rated a 3-star card. Despite the very big power potential of the card, I see it as just a option for mid-range hunter, and I think this will make the mid-range hunter go 2 different ways. At least it has that. One with the Spellstone and more secrets, one without the Spellstone, and looking more like your current mid-range hunter. Seeping Oozling. Well, there's a lot of cool tricks you can pull with it, such as copying Death Rattle of Katharina, or even more exotic things. I just don't see that deck coming together, and believe me, I tried putting it together. So I'm going to rate the Oozling a 1-star card. To My Side. A very memed about card for a hunter. People look at it and wonder, why is this card just twice as good as Animal Companion and it costs twice as much? Bundling is really powerful, don't you forget it, and this could in theory cost 7. So it does have a discount for the all-spell deck. So it is worth playing towards, but currently there's not enough tools for it, so this card is not going to see play competitively. But mark my words, it's a card to look out for in probably about 8 months. That's my voodoo magic. After the rotation, after the next set and 2 sets from now, there will finally be enough spells that this card can be considered. Crushing Walls. 7 mana AoE for a hunter. Boy, our hunter is going to need better spells than this in order to make that deck work. Just can't even fathom, like, even if this card costs less, people could play around it by putting their weak minions on the left and on the right. It just costs way too much for the removal. They need something better than this. This is woefully inadequate and 1 star. Rock Delar, similar to My Side, this is a weapon that currently doesn't have enough support to be played competitively right now, but I think 8 months down the line, in 2 expansions, that's when you're going to start seeing enough hunter spells. So for now, 1 star card for this set. It will not see any competitive play, but down in the future, this card is actually really, 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 really good. It gives you so much fuel at the end. And finally, Katharina Winterwisp. I'm going to give her a 3-star rating, and I'm actually going to say something that not very many people are saying. You just toss her in mid-range hunter, and that's fine. Here's the reason why it's okay, and I think people are really underestimating this recruit mechanic. Like, would Katharina Winterwisp be okay if she just said Battlecry, draw a card, Death Rattle, draw a card? But it's way better than draw a card. Recruit is so much better. Even if you're doing the Alley Cat thing, you want to get that Alley Cat out of your deck. It would be the next card that you would draw potentially anyways, even though it's like a beast. So, in other words, it's perfectly fine to put Katharina Winterwisp in your deck with Alley Cats. You're getting that card out of the way in the late game. So much upside, though. You could get Savannah Highmane. So I do think you just put this card into mid-range hunter. So that's why I gave her 3. She's a sometimes card. Maybe you go bigger as mid-range hunter. and you put her in, but I see her as good enough. But anyways, along with Dire Mole, Hunter gets a few tricks that are going to boost the power of mid-range Hunter. And give it some options. Are you going to put in the late game Threat of Katharina? Are you going to put in secrets in order to play Lesser Emerald Spellstone and enjoy the very big power off of that? And here comes Mage, starting with Shifting Scroll. Shifting Scroll 1 star for me because I don't feel like I want to go through the hoops of trying to cast the perfect spell that you get from the scroll at the right time. No card really is worth risking that influence of, oh, I rolled unplayable spells in the early game and I just got bad spells in the late game. Arcane Artificer. This is, in my eyes, a 3-star card. And this is one of the rare occasions where I feel like I'm just going to introduce the idea now. A new archetype can be formed out of these cards because so many cards were given support towards the big spell mage archetype. Arcane Artificer is one of those. It can be played in the early game if you're up against aggro. And draw it late, it gains you 6-7 armor and gives you an 1-2 as well for 1 mana. That's really strong. Raven Familiar, 3-star card. I'm pretty much rating all of the general big spell mage cards around 3 stars because I think it's around the tier 3 level. Similar to how Control Mage is currently, I feel like this is going to be a variant on Control Mage, where you play cards like Arcane Artificer and Raven Familiar and take advantage of the big spells in your deck. About a 2 mana 2/2, which often draws you a card. That's very powerful. Lesser Ruby Spellstone, 2 stars. Clearly meant for exactly an Elemental Mage deck, and I've played a lot of Elemental Mage. I don't think Elemental Mage is going to make it to be a tier 3 deck. Other decks just value too much more than that, and even with the extra help that you're getting from Leyline Manipulator, still not really going to break a tier 3 deck, I think. Explosive Runes, 4 stars. This is a very exciting secret. It can be played for 0 mana with Kirin Mage. It supports the very aggressive Secret Mage archetype extremely well. Replacing Mirror Entity, very powerful, kills the minion that your opponent plays, over damages your opponent if they played a weak minion. It's a fireball that you lay down preemptively, potentially for 0 mana. That's so good. And it's rated as if it's going to be tier 2. But should Secret Mage make it to tier 1, then this will be a 5-star card. I'm currently rating it 4 though. Leyline Manipulator. This card gets a lot of hype as it's Yeti plus Innervates. It's an elemental to boot, and it works with Lesser Ruby Spellstone. So why am I only rating it a 3-star? Well, 1, I don't think that the idea that Simulacrum combo without Quest is really that valid. I think Quest is better. Will you run this alongside it? No, I don't think you have the room. 2, I don't think Elemental Mage is going to be that strong, not really going to be a tier 3 card. So basically, where does that leave the Leyline Manipulator? I think it's just going to be played in a straight up tempo deck, perhaps. It doesn't need that much benefit. It's already a 4 mana 4/5, but I think just not quite enough value still. Dragon's Fury. I think this is one of the big reasons why Big Spell is good. For 5 mana, you get to clear the board. Wow. So I'm going to rate this a 3-star card. I think that it could be a tier 3 deck. And I'm not really counting this as defining that deck, because all of these cards together kind of are just generally good for that deck. So my definition of all of these big spell cards are that if the deck manages to make it to tier 3, or even like top tier 4, I'm going to be like, okay, 3 stars was about right. But for now, let's go to Deck of Wonders, which is going to be so weak that it won't even make the big spell deck. So slow, 1-star card. Aluneth, the best, in my opinion, legendary weapon. And not just that, I think it is the best card in the set. Whew, wow. 6 mana, draw 3. If it survives, then it's 6 mana, draw 6. If that survives 1 more turn, 6 mana, draw 9. 6 mana, draw 12. People are afraid of it drawing too many cards, and yes, you need to specifically put it into a deck that can quickly play all the cards. But fortunately, there is an archetype for that. It's Tempo Mage, it's Secret Mage. This is generally the last card you're going to want to play, so you're usually out of fuel at that point, and then you play this and you have so much fuel. This card, I think, is going to take Secret Mage to great heights, tier 2, maybe even tier 1. So, 5-star card, Aluneth. Whew. And finally, we have the big finisher of Big Spell Mage. I think this card is good enough to put as the finisher there, even though you already potentially have Frostlich Jaina. Dragon Caller Alana, I rate a 3-star. As kind of the full 3-star bundle, I have rated pretty much all the Big Spell Mage cards 3-star, and I think that that deck will make it to around tier 3 as a variant of Control Mage. So Mage actually gets some pretty big excitement, an entirely new deck archetype, Big Spell Mage. These 2 cards for Secret Mage are really, really impactful and could boost Secret Mage into a brand new tier. Paladin, we're starting with Dry Gulch Jailer. I think this card fits only into buff Paladin, but I think it's just good enough to warrant some serious experimentation with it. So I'm going to rate it a 2-star card. You get 3 silver hand recruits in your hand, you hand buff all of them, and then they become pretty good. 1 mana 2/2s, potentially 1 mana 3/3s apiece. Sure. Potion of Heroism. I'm gonna rate that a 4-star card. I'm not absolutely sure that it's going to fit into Murloc Paladin. I'm not entirely sure what to cut for it, but it certainly does look powerful. The ability is great, draw a card is great. It's costed pretty aggressively, I'd say. And perhaps what's most exciting is, I think, a deck that has the following 3 buffs: Potion of Heroism, Blessing of Kings, Spike Ridge Steed, can legitimately run Linessa Sunsorrow. I wasn't going to justify Linessa Sunsorrow without Potion of Heroism, but with Potion of Heroism, yeah, that could be a mid-range Paladin thing now. Run all 3 of those buffs and Linessa. Lesser Pearl Spellstone. I'm rating this a 2-star card. What normally would have been a 1-star in the old rating system. But I think that this kind of control Paladin, some sort of Healadin, will see enough experimentation that this will make, at some point during the meta, a blip before disappearing. And this is more of a bet that it's just competitive enough that people are willing to experiment with it. And that goes the same with Benevolent Djinn, which is also a 2-star card. It seems like you would play one with the other. Benevolent Djinn and Lesser Pearl Spellstone just work hand in hand, since Djinn buffs the Spellstone. Djinn you kind of want to put into a slower mid-range deck or a control Paladin, and I feel like both of those cards just see just enough intrigue, just enough power level in order to see some experimentation before ultimately realizing, it's not actually strong enough. Unidentified Maul. Originally I was going to, just like the last 2 cards, rate this a 1-star, but I'm going to hesitantly rate it a 2-star card. I feel like Murloc Paladin is going to try out the card, and you could flood out with enough Murlocs on the board and then get a pretty good Unidentified Maul off. I am pessimistic about the card, but optimistic enough to think that it's going to warrant some experimentation. Call to Arms. Now this is the exciting card for Paladin I see, and that's a 5-star card right there. So you're recruiting 3 cards that cost 2 or less. You might be thinking, so how can I really abuse this card? Can I put in Dirty Rat? Can I put in Millhouse Maelstrom? That was my first thought, but after thinking about it some more, I realized you just put this into Murloc Paladin, and you get your 1-drops, you get your 2-drops, and that's okay. Sure, sometimes you're summoning just 1/2s or 1/3s, but they're Murlocs, and also when you summon those Tidecallers, they don't have to be 1/2s, they can be buffed. And getting Righteous Protector is also really good. 1/1 Divine Shield Taunt is strong. So Call to Arms, I think, really insane and a great card in Murloc Paladin. Could push that deck into tier 1 status. Now I'm a little bit afraid for Call to Arms and Murlocs in generals due to the presence of Duskbreaker, which we'll talk about soon, one of the better cards in the set, but maybe not all decks will have Duskbreaker, right? Maybe not enough decks will have it. Next up, Level Up. 1-star card, I just don't see it. It's too weak, it's too slow, you're not going to have that many guys out. But it is a card that in the future, if Muster for Battle were to be printed, for example, again, it could be strong enough. We're looking for some more guy creation power though, and the same goes for the next card, Crystal Lion, which I rate a 1 star. So while you could get a 1 mana 5/5 Divine Shield on turn 6, along with your Stand into Darkness, I just feel like the entire thing is not worth the effort. Valinir, a really strong card for buff Paladin, and a potentially strong choice for a Healadin deck, since this card, you can swing so many times with it, assuming that you keep getting healed. You kind of need that healing to fuel your weapon swing into minions, as you do have potentially infinite attacks with it. So I'm going to rate it a 3-star card for both the potential of buff Paladin, which I don't think is going to be that strong a deck, but also because of the Healadin possibility, which I also don't think is going to be that strong a deck. But the card just has 2 horses running for it, and I'm going to semi-bet on one of those horses being maybe tier 3-ish. Linessa Sunsorrow is also a card that I admit that I am going to give a bit of a biased rating towards. So originally, she seemed in theory good enough with Blessing of Kings and Spike Ridge Steed, but I've done the statistical math, and 2 Blessing of Kings is not good enough for Linessa. But what you really want is Spike Ridge Steed, so calculating the chances of drawing both Spike Ridge Steed and drawing Linessa and drawing the Spike Ridge Steed before Linessa, sometimes you are going to be left with a Linessa that's not that much value. However, with Potion of Heroism coming out, I can see you cramming all 3 of those buffs together and then using the Linessa to go a good enough effect. I'm going to bet on the Linessa potentially being in some sort of mid-range Paladin deck, running exactly 6 copies of buffs. And no, I don't think Quest Paladin is going to work. So anyways, Linessa, 3 stars. So Paladin gets a bunch of toys for buff Paladin, gets some anti-aggro tools for control Paladin, and Linessa is a really interesting legendary which could change how much that the mid-range and even the control Paladins want to buff things with single target buffs in their decks. Next up, we've got Priest. Psionic Probe, I'm going to rate 2 stars. I think it will fall off in favor, but I think Raza Priest will try it out. As a card that gets spells, and spells are definitely better than minions, it's way better than Mind Vision. I've started to believe that, and might just be good enough to actually be a mainstay in Raza Priest. I can see that happen. I'm leaning more towards no though, which is why I've rated it 2 stars. Twilight Acolyte, 5 stars. This card is better Aldor Peacekeeper for a Dragon Priest deck. So there are 2 different directions it can go. It can go into a Dragon Priest deck. It can go into a Keleseth Raza Tempo deck. It combines with Potion of Madness. It combines with Cabal Shadow Priest. It combines with Shadow Word Pain. And the card itself is incredible value since you'll pretty much always be playing it on a 3 attack or more minion. It's a 3 mana 3/4 with upside. With huge upside. So what a great card. What an insane card. Gilded Gargoyle. This card is really slow as a 3 mana 2/2, but I'm going to give a very optimistic rating of 2 stars to this. It's between a 1 star and a 2 star for me, but I think that Raza Priest just might try him out. The ability to get a 0 mana coin is pretty good. Some Raza Priests are running Gadsan Auctioneer right now, and coin is a great card to input into that, and as well into Raza with the Anduin out. Could be worth up to 8 damage the turn that you play Prophet Valen, since you're playing a spell and you're gaining a mana, which could be used for another spell. Given that a lot of priests are running Silence, and maybe Silence becomes less useful, then it's possible that you would instead fit in this coin generator card. Unidentified Elixir, that's a 1-star card for me. I don't really see Zoo Priest being a thing. Dragons are moving towards a bit more control-ish, and even if a Zoo Priest were a thing, I don't think the card is strong enough to put into the deck. Twilight's Call, I'm going to rate that a 2-star card. I don't ultimately see the Death Rattle Priest deck taking off, but there is the potential for Awaken the Makers and N'Zoth, and it's possible that Big Priest picks it up and tries to resurrect the Obsidian statues with it, but I'm not really seeing it happening. Dragon Soul, the Priest Legendary Weapon, I'm rating 1 star because it just is too slow to get going. You have to work so much to get it to spawn even the first 5/5, and the turn that you pay for this card, you're not even getting anything. If you're playing that many spells, you're probably playing Raza Priest anyways, and you're just machine gunning your opponent down to death. No need to create dragons. Duskbreaker! Widely hyped as perhaps the best card in the set. This is a 5-star card for me. Excavated Evil was 5 mana. This card, you get a 1 mana discount on that, and you get a 3/3, and it's a dragon, so all of your other Dragon Matters cards are even better. Really insane card, and is going to be the card that might move some Raza Priests to include the Dragon package, as well as moving the Tempo Raza Priests, the ones of Keleseth, into more of the Dragon theme, I'd say. Temporis! 1-star card. I think this is a pure meme card with no real utility. Psychic Scream! Wow, 5-star card. I think this is really top-notch removal, gets around death rattles. Absolute blowout against Token Druid when they cast Living Mana. Usually a blowout against any aggressive deck because you have the chance of shuffling their early game minions back into their deck, and then they have a slightly higher chance of drawing garbage in the late game. I do think it's only exactly a 1 copy of in Raza Priest, and that's pretty much, I think, the only deck that I'll see play in. I'm not sure it's good enough in Big Priest, but just being good enough to make it in the Raza Priest as one of the best cards in Raza Priest is enough to give it 5 stars. Lesser Diamond Spellstone is a card that I see replacing Free from Amber in a Big Priest deck, and perhaps a 1-of in that deck. So for that reason, I'm going to rate it a 3-star card, as kind of a card that might make it into Big Priest barely as a 1 copy of. So Priest is a pretty big winner for this expansion, getting the Dragon synergy with such strong cards such as Duskbreaker and Twilight Acolyte, and even getting a toy for Raza Priest and Psychic Scream. For Rogue, we start off with their legendary weapon, the Kingsbane. Keeping weapon buffs, I originally was not going to rate this card very high, but after building some decks, I thought, hey, this might actually work out in Miracle. It's a useful card to stop off some early game aggression, and you put on the Deadly Poisons on the card, potentially put on a Leeching Poison, and it comes back and back. Got a lot better when I saw the Cavern Shiny Finder. So Kingsbane and Cavern Shiny Finder, I'm going to rate both cards 3 stars, so let's take this one at a time. Kingsbane, 3-star. Cavern Shiny Finder, 3-star. You put this card into the same deck as Kingsbane. Pretty simple as that. After your Kingsbane breaks, you play the Cavern Shiny Finder and you find your Kingsbane, which hopefully has been buffed. You replay the Kingsbane. It's a really good weapon for the 1 mana cost. I see both of these cards potentially seeing play in Miracle Rogue. Since you cycle fast enough, the Deadly Poison is a really good card with the Gul'dan Auctioneer anyway, since it just costs 1 mana. Nice way to keep going. Every single Rogue secret, I'm actually going to rate 2 stars. So starting with Sudden Betrayal, 2 stars. Even though it just protects against an attack, and I kind of likened it to Noble Sacrifice, you are also causing damage to one of your the opponent's minions, and it's possible they're in an awkward position enough that if they were to attack with a minion, they would end up losing that minion, or they would end up killing a minion. So I think the Sudden Betrayal is pretty decent. Evasion, this is my most hesitant of all of the secrets to give 2 stars. Because you'd have to time the evasion perfectly, but there are some matchups where the evasion can be really good, such as against a very wide board. You get it out, you heal a bunch actually against Token Druid, potentially Zoo, in the mid game. If you play it right and very cleverly, you could escape death for 1 turn in the late game. I think the card is interesting enough that it'll warrant enough play that it'll make it into the, hey, this card actually saw play at some point competitively. And we've got Cheat Death, which I'm also rating 2 stars. You set that card up right before your Gul'dan Auctioneer, and you play the Auctioneer, you do a bit of a combo, you get the Auctioneer back maybe on your first Auctioneer, you're able to go much less because of it. Maybe you're willing to play Auctioneer with just 1 spell the first time around, because getting a 4-mana Auctioneer allows for some pretty insane stuff the next Auctioneer. Sonya Shadow Dancer, I'm rating a 3-star card. I looked back at the history of Tempo Rogue, and at one point Shadowcaster was in that deck, and that's a 5-mana 4/4. Sonya Shadow Dancer does much the same thing, except even bigger upside, because you can get multiple things back into your hand, or rather, you can get copies of them. You play her the turn that you're trading stuff in, and you're just getting good stuff. Possibly get more Vile Spines, possibly get more Bone Mares. That's just starting. Given that Tempo Rogue is such a strong deck, and I think that Sonya is a legitimate option for you to tech into, I'm giving Sonya a 3-star rating. Kobold Illusionist. I'm not a big enough dreamer to think that Illusionist is good. The biggest benefit is going to be with Death Rattle cards, and that's mainly Jade with the Stalker and the Aya, but I just don't see that version working. So, 1-star card Illusionist. Valdorai's Strider. I think that this card is extremely interesting. I don't think Tempo Rogue draws enough cards to put this into that, but I do see Miracle Rogues running this card for sure. Mill Rogue, maybe, but I don't really put any stock into Mill Rogue. So Valdorai's Strider gets a 4-star from me for potentially pushing, being a card that defines the Miracle Rogue, and potentially Miracle Rogue becomes quite a bit better with this card. Potentially 16 worth of stats on 4 mana. Elven Minstrel. This is one of the power cards that Rogue is getting here, and I'm giving it a 5-star rating. Very shocked that this card was printed when Tempo Rogue was so strong. I feel like it fits right into Tempo Rogue. It's not a 4-drop, and Tempo Rogue is missing 4-drops, but this, even though it costs 4, it's not a 4-drop. You don't really want to play it on 4. Unless you're lucky enough to have Backstab with it. I feel like Counterfeit Coin might come back into the Tempo Rogue repertoire just because this card is so powerful and gets you fuel. Probably will oust the Lich King from the endgame, because now instead of playing that card, you can just play this card to get more fuel, which will probably end up being more mana worth of value and playing wise than even the Lich King. And finally, Lesser Onyx Spellstone is a card designed for this Death Rattle Rogue, which I think is simply getting outclassed by Tempo Rogue, so I rate the Spellstone a 1-star. So overall, Rogues are getting some pretty nifty toys. I think the Legendary Weapon is pretty fun. The fact that you can bring it back is really cool, and they're actually getting a few options for Tempo Rogue, as well as just a really strong card for Tempo Rogue. And not just that, a really strong 2 cards for Miracle Rogue. Is Miracle Rogue back? We'll see. So for Shaman, we'll start with Unstable Evolution. I'm going to rate that card 2. Originally, I'm going to go ahead and spoil the rest of the Shaman ratings here. I was going to rate every single Shaman card a 1-star, but then I realized, hey, some people actually like playing Shaman, and for some reason, they'll probably test out 2 of the better cards here. I'm not going to make that big a mistake this time around by ranking a whole class just 1-star, because Shaman is last place here. In order to get out of last place, it's like one of the worst classes right now. In order to get out of that, you need some really good cards printed. These cards just aren't that good. Unstable Evolution is probably just barely a fair card, and does kind of fit into the current Evolve Shaman list. Evolve is just so much better in general, though, because if you're Unstable Evolutioning 3 times, it costs 3 mana. Evolve across like your Doppelgangsters just costs 1 mana. Just because I think enough people will try it out that it'll make a blip on the played radar, I'll rate it 2 stars. Murmuring Elemental, on the other hand, I think will be weak enough and found out so fast in the first week that people will not be trying that out in the future. So I'm going to rate that a 1-star card. I think even if a Shaman Elemental deck manages to appear, this is not good enough to be in it. Kobold Hermit, Primal Talismans, and Windshear Stormcaller. I'm blanketing those all at 1-star. I mean, that's just so much work to summon Alec here, and those 3 cards are all weak individually. Kobold Hermit is just too weak to add a 1/1 to your hero power for 2 mana. Primal Talismans is just too weak, like Soul of the Forest, except always getting basic totems. And Windshear Stormcaller is decent, but the requirement is just too high to actually pull that off. Crushing Hand, I'm rating a 1-star because I just don't see Control Shaman as being high enough value in this meta. The other decks just have it Shaman handily beat here. Shaman is currently too fair to compete with the super value of these control decks. So for that same reason, I'm rating Healing Rain a 1-star card. This is one of the cards that's actually strong, but in this meta, I don't see Control Shaman being a thing. This is clearly a card for Control Shaman. So currently, it's a no for me. Grumble World Shaker. Looks monstrous, right? 6 mana, 7/7. with such an awesome ability that you can just return all your cards back into your hand and they just cost 1. Clearly a fit for the Shaman Elemental deck, and for that reason, I'm going to rate it only a 2-star card, because I just think Elemental Shaman is nowhere near tier 3 status. And Grumble, while a strong card, isn't going to bring it there by himself. But enough people are going to look at him and be like, wow, this looks like an awesome card, I'm going to try it. Which is the reason why it's a 2-star instead of a 1-star. Lesser Sapphire Spellstone. This is a card that you want to combine with your Ancestral Spirits to make some big Shaman things. But Big Priest is better, Big Druid is better. Why are we trying for the big Shaman thing? I just don't think it'll work out. So Lesser Sapphire Spellstone gets a 1 for me. And finally, the Rune Spear, quite possibly the most laughable legendary weapon out of all of them. The Shaman spells just simply aren't good enough to warrant playing this weapon. 1 star. They just don't have enough spells that are good when not targeted, to be specific. Ugh, not looking good for Shaman, I gotta say. So last expansion, they got the free Shaman package. This expansion, they're getting the Summon Alakir with your Totems package. But boy, all those Totem cards are weak. And they got some Control Shaman tools, but Control Shaman is nowhere near the level that it needs to be to compete at the moment, I'd say. Warlock gets Kobold Librarian, a massive, insanely overpowered card, especially for 1 mana. So just starting off at 1 mana, you're getting way more than the 1 mana you put into it. Novice Engineer, 2 mana, draws a card. This card, 1 mana, draws a card, and is a 2/1. Absolutely insane. Gonna see play in Zoo. Gonna see play in Warlock because of that Amethyst Spellstone. And even if it didn't have the Amethyst Spellstone, would probably see play anyway, so 5 stars. Wow, what a card. Dark Pact. That's a really interesting card that I just couldn't find a use for, but 8 healing is a lot for 1 mana. That's like 3 mana worth of healing. I was just about to rate this 1 star, and I actually have it on my ratings list at 1 star, but you know, it's one of those cards that I'm going to think that the community is going to be so enthralled by that they'll actually try to play with it, and it'll see some amount of competitive play. Just enough to, I guess, give it a 2-star rating. I compare it to Sacrificial Pact. No one was running Sacrificial Pact, and that was just heal 5 and destroy a demon. This one, you can aim at friendly death rattles, such as eggs. The thing is, Zoo really doesn't need to kill their own minions, and I really don't think that the Possessed Lackey is good enough to kill. I'm actually going to downgrade the rating. I talked myself out of it when comparing it with Sacrificial Pact, and I realized why I'd set this actually at 1 star. So we're going with 1 star for Dark Pact. Vulgar Homunculus, a very powerful taunt minion on 2. The main problem is it interferes with Keleseth, and I think Keleseth is still too good for Zoo to replace it with Homunculus, so that means this card only goes into Control Warlock. Control Warlock is currently a tier 4 deck, and yet I am going to rate this Vulgar Homunculus 4 stars, because I think with the total amount of tools that Control Warlock is getting here, it has a decent chance of rising to tier 2. Even a chance of going to tier 1, also a chance of going to tier 3, but a lot of good stuff for Control Warlock. We're going to cover them all here. Hooked Reaver. Whoa. 4 mana, potential 7/7 as long as you're 15 health or lower. 5-star card. If you're Zoo, if you're Control Warlock, inevitably through the course of the game, if it lasts long enough, you're going to be able to play this as a 4 mana 7/7 taunt. I think that the condition, being at 15 or less health, is simple enough to achieve. I look forward to playing it across Zoo and Control Warlock. Even gets returned with Blood Reaver gul'dan as a 4/4, but hey, 4/4 demon, that's better than nothing. Lesser Amethyst Spellstone. This is one of the Spellstones I'm most excited for, and I'm going to rate it a 4-star card. It's a major thing that Control Warlock was looking for, the ability to regain health. And 4 mana to basically kill a minion, since it'll deal a very strong amount of damage to one. Deal 7, heal 7, that's insane. I'm seeing Lesser Amethyst Spellstone as finally Warlock gets a good spell. It's been a while. Cataclysm. This card single-handedly, I think, makes the Quest Lakari Sacrifice look so much better and potentially viable in a deck that I'm going to try immediately. because I've always liked Lakari Sacrifice. So Cataclysm I rate 4 stars. Cataclysm does work with Malchezaar's Imp. You play Malchezaar's Imp, you play Cataclysm, you discard 6 cards, you activate the quest, you draw 6 cards. I think that's a real deck right there. Possessed Lackey, I'm rating 1 star. Oh man, a 5-mana 2/2 is just way too slow. I don't think the combo of the Dark Pact is really real here, and I don't think the combo of Sacrificial Pact is worth it either. If you were looking to pull out demons for the cheap, might I interest you instead for Skull of the Minari, the Warlock legendary weapon. I am going to be a bit of a dreamer here and rate it a 3-star card, because I do see some variant of Warlock where they put in 2 Void Lords and they put in Skull of the Minari. I'm really looking forward to trying that deck out too. Because if you play the 5-mana Skull of Minari and then on the following turn you pull out your Void Lord, that is incredible value. You get so much more mana to tap with. You can accelerate onto Void Lord on turn 6. Wow. That's just... I'm dreaming, but I can see this dream. Rin the First Disciple. Looks like just a meme. Dumping that much mana into a ritual seems insane, but yet I'm going to rate it a 2-star card. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I think that there is some metagame that could pop up where you do have the time to complete this ritual, and then killing your opponent's deck in a Control v Control matchup is really good. I could see it potentially being in some tournaments, in a tournament control meta as well. So for that reason, I don't think she's completely useless, and we'll give her the 2 treatment. For the most part on the latter, if tempo decks are anywhere near prevalent and there are aggro decks, I do think that Rin is generally too slow. So I'm mostly counting on the idea that we're going to see her surprise in some high value tournament at some point and have her justify her 2 value there. And finally, last but not least, Void Lord. This card looked kind of lame-ish when it was first revealed compared to Obsidian Statue, and it was like, But add up the stats on this, it's a 6/18, all of which is taunt for 9 mana. And certainly you can't add the death rattles like that. You can't just add the 1 attack of the Voidwalkers into the 3. But this card's mostly really strong because Gul'dan brings it back. And as has been evidenced in the past by N'Zoth bringing back cards such as Infested Tauren, bringing back taunts is really, really good. And bringing back a taunt that costs that much is really, really good. But Void Lord is not only good because it might just be good by default, but because it has so much synergy with cards like Skull of the Minari, and also my pet favorite Master O card. Because of all these possibilities, I'm rating Void Lord 4 stars. And I actually think if Control Warlock becomes a major deck, Void Lord is going to be a part of it. So boy is Control Warlock getting the hookup here, with so many fun toys, including Vulgar Homunculus, Lesser Amethyst Spellstone, Skull of the Minari even. Rin, she's kind of fun, but hey, even has some fringe possibilities. Void Lord. Zoo gets some fun things too with Kobold Librarian. Hooked Reaver for both Zoo and Control Warlock. Just so many good cards for Warlock here. I'm happy since I'm a Warlock main, I'd say. Identify closest with Warlock. And finally, last and possibly least, Warrior. Starting with Dry Whisker Armor. It is like Antique Killbot, but only costs 2. That's a major upgrade. The thing is, in this tempo metagame, I don't think the armor up speed bump is that strong. That said, though, I do see this card as replacing the Bring It On that at least Fibonacci at one point had in his N'Zoth Control Warrior. And N'Zoth Control Warrior was pretty decent. I'm hemming and hawing quite a bit on whether or not I'm going to rate armor 2 or 3 stars. And I'm going to go with 2 stars. As a note to myself in the future when I review this, if Control Warrior ended up being like a very select few people managed to hit top legend with it, I'll probably call it a tier 3 deck instead of like a tier 4 deck, even if it has a massively negative win rate overall. Just some people hitting top legend with it might prove that Control Warrior is still playable. And it has to be more than just Fibonacci, I'd say. But overall, I look at all these cards and I'm like, it's not good enough for Control Warrior to make a big comeback. So next up is Bladed Gauntlet, a weapon that doesn't replace Fiery War Axe, but is more of a late game weapon. I'm rating this a 2-star card because I do see it as potentially 2 shield slams and certainly worth experimentation with, but I do also see it as Gorehowl. I don't really see it working out. I don't see it as an insane enough card to bring Control Warrior back. Kobold Barbarian, boy does this card suck. 1 star. You're only getting the beginning attack off, and it's just worse than Ogre Brute, since Ogre Brute has a higher chance of aiming towards where you want it to aim. This one's just completely random. Reckless Flurry, I'm rating this one 1 star. I don't really see this being better than the Whirlwind, Sleep with the Fishes, or the Ravaging Ghouls, Sleep with the Fishes, or the Blood Razor, Sleep with the Fishes. I think generally that AoE is strong enough. I do see the potential, of course, with the Bring It On, or even the Unidentified Shield, or the Dry Whisker Armor, or even Ironhide, but I don't buy into this. And I see Control Warrior just sticking with good old Sleep with the Fishes. And Brawl. No need for Reckless Flurry. For Gemstead Golem, that's a really efficient stat line for 6 mana. 14 mana worth of stats, along with Taunt, and like probably one of the best division of stats I've ever seen. 5/9 with Taunt, that's so big. This is a card that pushes a Control Warrior agenda. However, just because I think Control Warrior is that weak, I am rating this card a 2-star card nonetheless. So between Control Warrior or even Recruit Warrior, I'm not seeing it happening. Unidentified Shield, so many of the possibilities are bad. I'm rating it 1 star. Gather Your Party, I actually last minute revised my rating of this from 1 to 2 stars. So the reason is this is a pretty novel concept. Big Warrior, it's going to be tried for sure. And I originally thought in the first week, people are going to be realizing already that's not good enough. But I think that very early on, maybe in exactly the second week, people will still be trying it and they'll then realize that it sucks. I think it's just simply worse than Big Priest. And why play a nearly strictly worse version? Lesser Mithril Spellstone. I think there just aren't enough weapons, really, to evolve this thing to the big and greater Spellstone. So I'm rating this a 1-star card. Geosculptor, yep, is value if you can actually play it while you have armor. But my main problem is I don't see running Bring It On just for a Geosculptor, yep. I don't really see Control Warrior, and I see this card as kind of another Rotface. Like, has a chance, but nah, just no. 1 star for me. And finally, the Warrior Legendary Weapon, Woe Cleaver. Certainly, there's a lot of potential value in here. If you stuff your deck with 8 mana and above minions, you play your Woe Cleaver. Over 3 turns, you're going to end up summoning these 8 or above minions. I don't think that Recruit Warrior is good enough on a personal level, but I do think the card is interesting enough, and the Big Warrior idea is interesting enough that there will be some competitive attempts at it before it fizzles out. So, for that reason, I'm rating it a 2-star. So Warrior is getting some Control Warrior tools. I just don't quite think it's good enough to justify the Control Warrior archetype yet. What they lack, again, is early game removal in the form of something traditional like Fiery War Axe, or more card draw. And I don't think the Recruit Warrior, Big Warrior is going to pan out, but hey, maybe it will. We'll see. So that's it for the class cards. So many really powerful class cards in this expansion, and so many interesting cards that I personally want to perform mad science with. And time for the neutral cards. There's a lot of unplayable stuff here, but there's also some game changers. Starting with Wax Elemental. This thing is basically Mage's mirror image, or it's the neutral shield bearer. Either way you think of it, it's just not strong enough. 1 star. Gravel Snout Knight. Turns out that a 1-mana 2/3 is pretty good, but if you're summoning a 1 cost for the opponent and he has 2 attack, then your Gravel Snout Knight becomes a 1-mana 2/1, and that's pretty bad, so 1 star for the Knight. Feral Gibber. It's a 1-mana 1/1. 1 star. Dire Mole. It's a 1-mana 1/3. 5 stars! Well, it's a beast, and that is the card that Hunter has been looking for. Something to play with Alley Cat. Token Druid can also play that, and then play a Mark of Yasharaj. Hunter can Crackling Razor Maul this thing for potentially a 4/3 on turn 2, attacking. So that's all very nice and good, and why this innocent looking card is a 5-star card. Scorpomatic, 1-star card, combines with Elder Peacekeeper, but it's really tough to put in a specific tech card when you could be up against Jade Druid or Raza Priest. Zola the Gorgon, my review card, and I think this time around, a solid kind of techie choice. So I'm going to give her a 3-star card. I see her as a sometimes card in Kazakus decks, because Zola in Kazakus is really good. It's kind of the same thing as Manic Soulcaster in Kazakus, which used to happen in Reno Mage. I think Zola is a good addition in decks where you have very specific build-arounds, and this set kind of welcomes build-arounds. So while I can't quite grasp all the possibility of Zola yet, I think there are possibilities for her. Void Ripper. It's Confuse on a 3/3. And I think that just might be good enough for decks like Token Druid, which have a bunch of high health, low attack minions. Maybe it's a finisher. Maybe it helps with Doomsayer. Maybe it helps with both at the same time. So for that reason, I'll give him a 2-star. I see that card as warranting either very light tech or at least some mana science. Toothy Chest. It's very flavorful, but it's also 3 mana 0/4. And boy, is a 3 mana 0/4 bad. 1-star. Stone Skin Basilisk. Interesting to combine Divine Shield and Poisonous, but that's a 3 mana 1/1 Divine Shield. Boy, is that bad when your opponent doesn't play very many minions. Boy, it could be bad against 2 Fireflies. So, 1-star. Shrieking Shroom. Kind of fill in the bad stat line theme. 3 mana 1/2. And it's just too vulnerable, and the value it gains isn't quite enough yet. Compares really unfavorably to Primal Phantom, so 1-star. Sewer Crawler. A much better evolve target because both targets are 3 cost. Pantry Spider didn't see any play though, any real play, so 1-star on this one also. Rummaging Kobold. After finally being able to see all the weapons in the set, none are that good to warrant a rummage over. And most are legendary weapons, which are one of anyways. It's just not worth it. It's too slow. 1-star. Lone Champion. Having theory crafted a bunch of decks, it just turns out that I like Tar Creeper to fit in a lot more. Even with Control Mage, you're often playing Arcanologist on 2, which means you might actually have a minion on 3. 2 stars on this one as a card that will be tested out and probably be found inferior to Tar Creeper most of the time. Kobold Apprentice. This random enemy effect is just too painful. And it's pretty much the same painfulness as Arcane Missiles, and it comes on a 2/1 body, which just isn't strong enough, so 1-star. Fungal Enchanter. This card's a major improvement. Side grade, but I think side grade with an improvement on Earthen Ring Farseer. There's many times where you actually want to heal both a minion and yourself, especially if you're playing Warlock. So for the same reason why Zoo didn't put an Earthen Ring Farseer, I suppose I'll have to give this card a 2-star. I think it's powerful enough in stats to warrant the experimentation, but it's really hard to find a spot for this card in most decks. Dragon Slayer. It's a 3 mana 4/3 Dragon Hate card, and I think that there are just enough of those Cobalt Scalebanes out there that this card is already going to be extremely impactful in Tempo v Tempo mirrors, or even an excellent control option. And it kind of reminds me of Big Game Hunter. Still a 3 mana 4/3 instead of a 3 mana 4/2 way back in the day. In addition, dragons are coming back for priests, so this has double duty to add in. I think it's going to be a very significant tech card. And usually tech cards are rated as 3, but I think this one is going to be so significant, and a 3 mana 4/3 isn't that bad anyways. So I'm going to rate this one a 4-star. I think it'll really play a part in a potential dragon metagame. Boisterous Bard is a far worse fungal enchanter, and for that reason I'm going to give it 1-star. Yes, it can pre-heal because it can give health to things that are already at full health, but just too weak. Compared to Shattered Sun Cleric, it's not even that strong. It's sometimes weaker, quite a few times weaker. The Darkness. Very cool flavor, one of my favorite flavors of the set. And I'm rating it 2 stars, just because there are some control decks which do draw a bunch of cards, and also it's definitely a tech option against Raza Priest. You play that on turn 4, they can't play their turn 5 Raza, since their deck is full of 3 candles. Snarky Devil. 1-star card. It's like Direwolf Alpha, but you paid 2 extra mana. Realistically, it's like Raid Leader, but Raid Leader is basically like Direwolf Alpha, except you paid 1 extra mana. Shroom Brewer. It's a lot like Earthen Ring Farseer. 1 more health, 1 more attack, 1 more healing, but I feel like that got outclassed by quite a few cards. Only really Control Warlock needed this neutral healing, and they've got Amethyst Spellstone now, so 1 star for the Shroom. Shimmering Courser. 1 star, it's a 4 mana 3/3. Way too slow, even for these supposed Paladin buff decks. Kobold Monk. 1 star. It's an interesting 3/6 stat line and protects yourself. And it's got a high amount of health for 4 mana, but it's very similar in use to Mindbreaker, and Mindbreaker didn't really get any traction. So, similarly, Kobold Monk is a 1 star card. Hoarding Dragon. 4 mana 5/6, but gives your opponent 2 coins when it dies. Which makes this card closer to a 6 mana 5/6. Plus, terrible, terrible things can happen to you with coins. So, 1 star. Ebon Dragonsmith. There just don't seem to be that many weapons that you'd want to discount, or there's not really consistent enough weapon usage. So, 1 star. Cursed Disciple. Turns out you're paying 1 extra mana for an additional Magma Rager, which is kind of a good deal, but just too slow in general. So, 1 star card. Trog Gloomeater. Quite a few of these cards, you can just look at the stat line and be like, this had better be an amazing ability. This is not enough of an amazing ability, so 1 star for the 5 mana 1/5. Guild Recruiter. Turns out that there weren't enough cards in the set to warrant recruiting 4 cost or lower cards, so 1 star for this one. Green Jelly. It's like Hogger. Hogger really wasn't anywhere near contention. This card compares really badly compared to Sludge Belcher. 1 star for this one too. Furbolg Mossbinder. Boy, is that a bad card. You have to get a 1/1 out or some sort of negative death rattle. It's just way too specific. 1 star. Fungalmancer. It's no Bone Mare. You're very optimistic if you think you can consistently get a board state where you have 2 extra minions on your opponent when it's your turn. So 1 star. Corrosive Sludge. 5 mana 5/5 with the weapon destruction effect. Seems like you would just use the 2 mana 3/2 or the 3 mana 3/3 with the armor. So 1 star on this one. Carnivorous Cube. Just due to the sheer amount of value that you can get for this one, I'm going to give this 2 stars. I personally don't think it'll work out, but there is a lot of value potential here by eating a death rattle, eating something about to die. I think it will be experimented with and then found wanting. Arcane Tyrant. Wow, this is a really strong card. A potential 0 mana 4/4. In quite a few decks, that's very realistic. Big Druid, Jade Druid, Big Mage, Big Spell Mage. So I'm going to give this one a 5-star rating. 0 mana 4/4s are excellent tempo. And you may think Jade Druid and Big Druid don't really need the tempo, and the 4/4 is just a minor speed bump, but we need every speed bump we can throw at the opponent. Spiteful Summoner. This one is kind of my reach one. I think this is a 4-star card, arguably 5, and I think it belongs specifically in the Zoo deck, which is running Doom. It's Kalento's idea, so I really like it. That means on 6 mana you're getting 4/4 and a Ren and Tem drop. Hungry Etten. A lot of stats, but still just a 1-star card. Kind of vanilla for just 6. The minion the opponent gets is generally going to be good enough to offset the stats on the Hungry Etten. Silver Vanguard. 7 mana 3/3. There wasn't anything too imbalanced with the 8 drops. I don't really see any combo effects here. 1 star. Corridor Creeper. This one is worth considering just because anything that could be a 0 mana 5/5 or 1 mana, 2 mana, 3 mana 5/5, that's worth considering, but it's a really bad top deck, and it's a card you don't really want to keep in your hand anyways. Seems unlikely I'm going to give it 1 star. Violet Worm. It's really, really slow, and it compares like Onyxia. It's a really good card for value to bring back with N'Zoth, but it's just too slow. 1 star. Marin the Fox, who've actually had a decent amount of time to practice our marining. Based off of the amount of play, it's safe to say at this point that it's a 1-star card. King Togwoggle. This is a pure meme card. You can kill your opponent in pretty interesting ways with milling the ransom, but that's way too much work. 1-star card. Don't get run over by tempo. Grand Archivist. This one I'm seeing in specifically some sort of hunter deck, perhaps, running exactly Call of the Wild. We're looking for big spells, which only can do good things to you, pretty much. And Grand Archivist strikes me as that type of card that can really be unfair when you hit exactly something big. Now, of course, you don't want to put it in the Doom Zoo deck, because casting Doom on 8 with the Grand Archivist just isn't good. However, I think that this has potential in a variant on Hunter. You remove the kill command, you remove all spells, and you simply have Call of the Wild on 9, and you have Grand Archivist on 8. And on 8, you're going to be summoning 4 things with your Grand Archivist play. Your Huffer won't have charge since it summons at the end of the turn, but that's a lot of stats for 8. You get a 4-7, a 4-4, a 2-4, and a 4-2. So, since I can only really put Grand Archivist in the specific Hunter running exactly Call of the Wild, and that's kind of a dodgy proposition, I don't have much faith in that. I'm going to just give Grand Archivist a 2-star rating. Sleepy Dragon is a 9 mana 4/12 with Taunt. Worse than Ysera, since Ysera kind of is threatening enough to have Taunt, but better in some case, in the case of, like, it fits into Recruit Warrior, since you need to get that big taunt. Ultimately, most of the time there are better options though. So Sleepy Dragon is a 1-star. Master Oakheart. I think this is one of the most exciting cards in the set, with the ability to cheat out an incredibly large amount of mana. Yes, you have to spend 9 mana for just a 5/5, and a 5/5 is only worth like about 4 mana. So where's the other 5 mana going? Drawing and playing a 1-attack minion. That could be Tark Reaper. 2 cost, you're getting the Homunculus. That's a 2 cost. The 3 attack, you could be getting Void Lord, and that's like 9 mana. So therefore, you could be getting something along the lines of a 12 mana savings. And getting 12 extra mana is a really big deal. It implied that the card that cost 9 mana was worth something like 20 plus mana. That reminds me of Ultimate Infestation. It's much faster in value than Ultimate Infestation, since all the cards you draw are immediately put into play. So I'm seeing a Master Oakheart control Warlock deck. You can also Master Oakheart the Dragon Hatcher, but I think that's much more of a meme and much more unlikely to be successful. Dragon Hatcher, it actually seems like most of the combo value is to get this with exactly Master Oakheart, but boy do I not want to fill my deck with 2 Dragon Hatchers for redundancy, or even 1 and try to get lucky with exactly 1 Master Oakheart. So, a 1-star card for Dragon Hatcher. Interesting applications include recruiting him or Barnesing him, but I'm just not really seeing the likelihood of that working. And that is a review complete. This expansion seems to have a lot of really, really strong cards. Like the 5-star cards here are, for the most part, fairly obvious. I tried to include 1, 2, or 3 that weren't incredibly obvious. I look forward to trying out a bunch of these cards and showing you what mad science can brew up. And I look forward to doing a bunch of dungeon run. So, bring on the Catacombs!